So this video, the third in a series, we're going to look at 4 specific things. First, we're going to look at 2 helpful extensions to help with that. We're going to look at some advice from the University of Amsterdam, some advice from a homegrown blogger from the US, and 3 lesson samples that use the principles from those previous 2. So the first thing I wanted to show you was 2 extensions. They sort of do the same thing, and they can be used other ways too. But there is Draftback and Revision History. Both of them are free. So Draftback has been around for a while. Revision History is a newer extension. All right, so I'm going to show you how both of these work, and they work very similar. So first we'll use Draftback. So once you've added it to your Chrome browser, your Google Docs will now have this little button. So this will be Google Docs that you own, right? So I can click on that, and it'll tell me how many revisions were made. So as I wrote this document, this is the number of revisions that were made. All right, so once this loads, you can click View, and then you can see the writing in real time. You can speed it up too. It will show you also when large chunks of text get pasted in there. And so that is a indication that maybe this was copied and pasted somewhere. The other tool that's very similar is Revision History. And so once you add that to your Chrome browser, you can now click on the Revision History button that appears here. It looks like a little feather or quill, and you can click on that, and this yellow bar appears, which tells you how many things were deleted, how many large copy and pastes were put there. And so I wrote this one so I know there aren't, and how many writing sessions it took to complete, and active writing time. So it gives you a little more details, but you can click on the details button. It gives you even more details. So you can click on the Show Drafting Process Replay link, and it'll do a very similar thing that Draftback did. But then it also gives you when it was written and how long it took to write. So it gives you a little more data on how it was written. So if a large chunk of text suddenly appears, it might be a red flag, or if nothing else, it's a conversation to have with your students. So both of these work when you are the owner of the document. So what I would suggest is you assign things through Google Classroom, because when you assign things with a template in Google Classroom where you make a copy for each student, they get that copy. But even if they create it in Google Classroom and they don't have a template, when they turn it in, what that does is it makes you as the teacher the owner of that document. And then you can use one of these 2 tools. All right, the University of Amsterdam actually has an entire page dedicated to making assessments more AI-proof for their faculty. So you can scroll through those. I've also linked it in the YouTube description. But here's sort of a list of takeaways that I got from this. So one of the things that they suggest is discuss academic integrity, right? Some students might actually not know that they can't have AI produce something and then turn it in as their own. So it's good to define these things, right? You might not want students to even have AI help them write, or maybe you only want them to use it to help them write. Whatever the case, have that discussion ahead of time, right? Another suggestion would be not to base your entire grade on one final assignment because of ethical issues that might arise from that, including AI detectors are not super accurate. Supervising students during assignments, it's just a good practice, right? As the expert in the room, you can guide students in the right direction, help them course correct before they make a huge mistake, right? Using more oral assessments, and we'll talk about that later, but developing speaking skills is a valuable skill. More important than anything, focusing on the process rather than focusing on the final product. A lot of the learning, and I think those watching can probably attest to this, that most learning happens in the process, not after the product is made, right? We do a lot of learning by making mistakes and then revising. Certainly true with writing. Making assessments a bit more personal might help too, where available. And if you're going to allow students to use AI, then they should be citing their source. So they suggest showing students how to cite AI created. Finally, using performance-based assessments or performance tasks is helpful because students will have to show that they know content by applying it, right? Not just theoretically writing about it, right? And so we'll go over a few of these. This I got from a blogger on soverellpublishing.com, so you can look him up. He's got a YouTube channel too. And he has some ideas on how to AI proof or AI resist some assignments. So making it current and modern because, at least the free version of ChatGPT only has data fed into it to a certain date. More hands-on dynamic learning, like the performance tasks discussed earlier, using images, and I'll show you an example of how to use images. And finally, just valuing the process is really important. Again, having students be motivated by the learning rather than the final product. Okay, so we'll take a look at some of these. The first assessment that we're going to take a look at that applies these AI-resistant principles is a map test. So the way that map test works is you give students in groups a set of about 20 index cards, and you present on the board a series of words that then students copy onto those cards. The example on the screen here are from Romeo and Juliet, right? So you could give them labels with major themes, images, characters, terminology from that unit. In this case, it's from the play. And then students are given a set of directions that tells them to arrange and rearrange cards according to connections that you see. So then students create a thinking map or a mind map of some sort, or a diagram, and they categorize things and they move things around. And the whole point is that they're discussing the best way to organize these cards on a table. Once, as a group, they're satisfied with that arrangement, they are supposed to write individually an explanation of that map, of the thing that they organized, right? So I could ask a large language model like ChatGPT to write me an essay that uses all of those terms about Romeo and Juliet. But that's not what this is asking. It's asking the student to explain their map, right? So as of right now, at least, it's a little bit more involved to have, and maybe not super possible, to take a picture of the map and then have a AI explain the map. It doesn't seem far-fetched. It could probably be done very soon, if not already, but it's not what you're at, right? You're asking students to explain that, right? And if you're watching them do it, I think it's a little simpler. Before ChatGPT, I've used this, and it produces great results. Not everyone has the same interpretation, but it's still accurate. It gives you an accurate portrayal of whether or not they understand the material. The next AI-resistant assessment that I'm going to show you is this idea of using a no-show chart with Flip, formerly known as Flipgrid. This is probably one of my favorite ways to assess students, not because it was AI resistant necessarily, but because it's just a great way to see if students actually understand the content. So the idea is you give students a T-chart, right? Traditional study guide would look something like this, where you have the terms on one side and then the definitions of the terms on the other side. And so you might even give the students the terminology, and then they, in the blank area, show you what they know or what they might need to know. So in this particular assessment, part one of the study guide is where students had to tell me everything that they think I want them to show me that they know about the terminology about tragedy. So if you read the directions, it says in the tell me column, tell me what you know about each term and how it relates to the play. Macbeth is open notes, open book, open internet. Just get the information down, right? For part two of this assessment is where the magic happens, right? If you look at the directions, it says choose what you think are the top 5. You might even break that down to like the top 3 from the list and record a 45-second recording on Flip, or maybe a minute if you're feeling generous. Explain everything you know about those, or why those are the most important terms. Right. So many benefits from this. First, because of the short amount of time, 45 seconds or, a minute, even students inevitably need to do multiple takes. They might even have to write out a script for themselves to read to get it to fit. And they're going to have to process that information over and over again as they do different takes. Right? So you're kind of tricking them into studying. Another benefit is that students have to evaluate which terms are going to be the most important ones, right? You can make that decision as the teacher, what you feel those are, or you just let the students be able to explain it to you. But either way, evaluating, judging, appraising, weighing, right? These are higher order thinking verbs, and that's what you're asking them to do. Another benefit of this is that it's you have short 1-minute clips that are relatively easy to grade, right? I can watch 1-minute clips faster than reading a bunch of writing, and students are going to practice speaking skills. I think that's just a benefit. I've included a prompt and sample that I use in a class at Cal State Bakersfield when I'm teaching an assessments class. The final assessment type that uses these AI-resistant principles that I want to show you here is creating a performance task, also known as performance-based assessments or task scenarios. And a very useful tool that I've found is using this GRASPS. It's a acronym for creating the assignment. And so the acronym is for the teacher to create the assignment. So think about what the goal is, what you want the student's role to be, who their audience will be, the situation, the product, and the standards for success, right? And so if you break that down, that's a pretty good performance task, right? So if you can define those things. All right. Now, students might be able to use AI to respond to some of components of a performance task, but because it's a performance, right, they have to produce something or perform something. It's harder to fake, right? Hope you found these videos helpful. Let me know in the comments.